The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton M. Christensen. Picture this. It's 1986, and Digital Equipment Corporation, or DEC for short, is absolutely crushing it. Businessweek literally compares challenging them to standing in front of a moving train. They're featured in the blockbuster business book, In Search of Excellence. By every conceivable metric, DEC is a brilliantly run, wildly innovative powerhouse. Now jump ahead just a handful of years to the early 1990s. Same company, completely different story. That same magazine now says DEC needs triage. Sales are cratering. A massive turnaround attempt has flopped. They've completely whiffed on the personal computer revolution, which, looking back, seems ridiculously obvious. So what the heck happened? Were the executives lazy and checked out? Did arrogance blind them? Did they suddenly lose their mojo? Here's the truly scary part. Nope, none of that. DEC's leaders were genuinely brilliant. They listened carefully to their customers. They poured money into the exact technologies those customers wanted. They did literally everything the management textbooks tell you to do. And that's precisely what destroyed them. This mind-bending paradox sits at the heart of one of the most influential business books ever written, The Innovator's Dilemma by the brilliant Clayton Christensen. For decades, this Harvard Business School professor was obsessed with one question: why do amazing companies fail? Why do industry giants stumble so predictably when new technology waves hit? He watched Sears, the undisputed retail king, completely miss the discount store revolution. He saw Xerox dominate the large copier market while somehow missing desktop copiers. And he watched this pattern repeat endlessly in computing. What he uncovered is genuinely profound and totally counterintuitive. It flies in the face of nearly everything we're taught about success. He discovered that for a specific type of innovation, what he called disruptive innovation, doing all the right things is exactly the wrong move. By the time we're done today, you'll understand this hidden force that shapes entire industries. You'll see why success can become a trap, why listening to your best customers can sometimes be fatal, and how the very strengths that make a company powerful can morph into its deadliest weakness. This isn't just for billion-dollar CEOs. This is for anyone who wants to understand how the world actually works, and how to spot the future when it arrives, not as a triumphant parade, but as a quiet, almost laughable little idea that nobody takes seriously. Until it's way too late. To crack this mystery of why successful companies fail, Clayton Christensen needed the perfect laboratory. He couldn't study genetics by watching humans. That takes 30 years per generation. He needed something that moved way faster. He needed, as he put it, the business world's version of fruit flies. He found them in the hard disk drive industry. You probably have a hard drive in your computer right now. That little box storing all your files and photos. Back in the 70s and 80s, this industry was absolutely bonkers. Companies would spring up, become giants, then vanish, all within a few years. It was the perfect place to watch success and failure on fast forward. When Christensen dug in, he spotted something really weird. There were two completely different types of innovation happening. The first was what he called sustaining innovation. This is the familiar kind. Making good products better. A car with better mileage. A sharper TV. A disk drive that holds more data. And here's the thing. With sustaining innovations, the big established companies were absolutely dominant. They were phenomenal at it. When some new technology came along that could help them build a better disk drive for their existing customers, more capacity, faster speeds, they jumped all over it. They'd throw hundreds of millions of dollars at it, assign their top engineers, work for years to master it, and they always won. This wasn't about lazy giants. This was about hyper-competent, aggressive leaders obsessed with giving customers exactly what they wanted, better performance. But then there was the second type of innovation, the one that changed everything. Christensen called it disruptive innovation. A disruptive innovation wasn't better. It was actually worse. At least, it was worse by the standards the best customers cared about. These new products were often simpler, cheaper, and offered less performance. Let's rewind to the 1970s. The biggest customers for disk drives were mainframe computer companies. Their computers were room-sized, and they needed drives with massive capacity. They constantly asked suppliers, "Can you give us drives that hold more megabytes?" Then, in the late 70s, a few scrappy startups introduced something new, an 8-inch disk drive. The dominant drives back then were 14 inches in diameter. These new 8-inch drives looked like a joke to the mainframe companies. They held way less data, ran slower, and their cost per megabyte was actually higher. The big, established disk drive makers showed these 8-inch drives to their best customers, who said, "Why would we ever want this? We need more capacity, not less." So the big companies did exactly what any well-managed company would do. They listened to their best customers and went back to perfecting those 14-inch drives. But here's the thing. Those little 8-inch drives didn't vanish. They found a new home in an emerging market, mini-computers. These computers were much smaller than mainframes and couldn't use those big, expensive 14-inch drives. For them, a smaller, cheaper drive, even with less capacity, was perfect. It was good enough. And the very thing that made the 8-inch drive unattractive to mainframe customers, its small size, was exactly what made it valuable to mini-computer buyers. Now here's where things get really interesting and dangerous. The little startups making these 8-inch drives weren't sitting still. They were working hard on their own improvements, making their drives a bit better each year. Their technology was improving incredibly fast. Meanwhile, the needs of the mainframe market were also growing, but way more slowly. Christensen drew this on a graph that became the most famous chart in his book. Imagine two lines moving left to right over time. One line, sloping gently upward, represents what the mainstream market needs. The other line, sloping steeply upward, represents what the new disruptive technology can deliver. For a long time, the disruptive technology sits way below what the mainstream market needs. It's not good enough, but because it's improving so rapidly, eventually its performance trajectory crosses the mainstream market's needs. And at that exact moment, everything flips upside down. By the mid-80s, those 8-inch drives had gotten so good they were now good enough for the low end of the mainframe market. Because they were smaller and cheaper, mainframe companies started adopting them. The old 14-inch drive makers who'd ignored this threat for years suddenly got attacked from below. Within a few years, almost every single one of them got wiped out. And then, get this, the whole cycle repeated itself. The successful makers of 8-inch drives became the new industry leaders. Their customers, the mini-computer companies, kept demanding more and more capacity. Then a new disruptive technology appeared, the 5.25-inch disk drive. Even smaller, with even less capacity. The 8-inch drive makers showed it to their mini-computer customers, who said, "We're not interested. We need more capacity, not less." So the 8-inch drive makers did exactly what any well-managed company would do. They listened to their customers and focused on making better 8-inch drives. But that little 5.25-inch drive found a brand new market nobody was paying attention to, the personal computer. For the first desktop PCs, this little drive was perfect. And sure enough, the 5.25-inch drive technology improved on its own steep trajectory until it became good enough for the mini-computer market. When it did, it invaded from below, and the once mighty 8-inch drive makers got toppled. This happened again with the 3.5-inch drive, which disrupted the desktop PC market by first finding a home in portable laptops. And then again with the 1.8-inch drive. It was a bloodbath on repeat. Leadership in the disk drive industry was incredibly fragile, lasting only until the next disruptive wave rolled in. So why did this keep happening? Once might be a mistake. Twice, a coincidence. But 5 times in a row? This was a pattern. Christensen realized he'd discovered a fundamental law of business. And the reason was baked into the very principles of good management. The first principle he identified is what he called a value network. A value network is the context where a company operates, its customers, suppliers, competitors, and investors. Each value network has its own unique definition of what's valuable. In the mainframe computer world, value meant one thing: massive capacity and speed. In the portable computer world, value meant something totally different: small size, low power consumption, and durability. Good companies become brilliant at creating value within their network. Their entire organization, their processes, culture, financial expectations, is tuned to delivering what their specific customers value. This creates a powerful upmarket pull. To boost profits, companies are constantly drawn toward developing more sophisticated products for more demanding customers, because that's where the higher profit margins live. The managers of those 14-inch drive companies looked at the 8-inch drive market and saw a tiny market with customers who wanted lower performance products that would sell for less money with lower margins. Moving down market looked like business suicide. Moving up market to build an even bigger, better drive for their most profitable customers looked brilliant. And this is the heart of the innovator's dilemma. The logical, rational decisions executives make to keep their companies profitable and growing are the exact same decisions that cause them to miss the disruptive innovations that will eventually destroy them. They're held captive by their customers. Their own success creates a kind of downward immobility. As Christensen famously put it, what goes up can't go down. The second powerful force is that small markets don't solve the growth needs of large companies. Think about Apple. In 1977, when Apple was a tiny startup, the success of the Apple II computer, selling about 43,000 units in its first 2 years, was a spectacular company-making triumph, was enough to take the company public. Now fast forward to 1994, Apple is a multi-billion-dollar giant. It launches a truly disruptive product, the Newton MessagePad, one of the world's first handheld computers. In its first 2 years, the Newton sells 140,000 units, more than 3 times what the Apple II sold. By startup standards, this was huge. But for the massive Apple of 1994, it was seen as a colossal failure. It barely dented the company's revenue goals. The market was just too small to matter. This is a trap every successful company falls into. A $40 million company only needs to find $8 million in new revenue to grow by 20%. But a $4 billion company needs to find $800 million in new revenue to hit the same growth rate. And here's the catch. There are no $800 million markets in their infancy. All great markets start tiny. By the time a market is large enough to be interesting to a big company, it's often too late. The new leaders have already emerged. The third force is that markets that don't exist can't be analyzed. Good companies are built on solid planning and market research. Before they invest millions, they want detailed analysis of market size, customer needs, and potential returns. But with disruptive technology, there is no market to analyze. It doesn't exist yet. The first customers don't know they need the product. They can't tell you what features they want. It's impossible to forecast revenue. Think about the Honda motorcycle story. In the 60s, Honda tried entering the American motorcycle market. Their strategy, based on careful market research, was to compete with the big, powerful bikes from Harley-Davidson. It was a total disaster. Their bikes weren't designed for long-distance highway riding and kept breaking down. But the Honda employees in America had brought their own small 50cc Super Cub bikes from Japan to get around town. One day, just for fun, they took them dirt biking in the California hills. People saw them and started asking where they could buy one of those cute little bikes. For years, Honda's management ignored this. They were focused on their real strategy of selling big motorcycles. Finally, out of desperation, they started selling the little Super Cubs. And in doing so, they didn't just sell a product, they created an entirely new market: recreational, off-road motorbiking for average families. It was a market no research could ever have discovered. It had to be stumbled upon through trial and error. That famous slogan, "You meet the nicest people on a Honda," wasn't created by some high-priced ad agency. It came from a UCLA student's class paper. Honda's initial strategy was completely wrong, but the company survived because it didn't bet everything on that first plan. It had enough resources left to pivot and embrace the unexpected opportunity that emerged. This leads to a crucial insight. For disruptive technologies, your initial plan should be a plan for learning, not a plan for execution. You have to assume your first strategy will be wrong. The winners aren't the ones who guess right at the beginning. The winners are the ones with enough flexibility and resources to try, fail, learn, and try again. So if you're managing a great company, what do? You're trapped. Your customers are pulling you up market. Your company's growth needs make small, emerging markets look unattractive, and your planning processes demand data that doesn't exist. It seems impossible, but Christensen found a way out. He saw that the few established companies that did succeed in navigating disruptive change all did one thing. They didn't try to fight these powerful forces. They harnessed them. The first step is to give responsibility for the disruptive technology to an organization whose customers actually need it. If the mainstream organization's customers don't want the disruptive product, then create a new, independent organization and put it in a context where it's forced to serve the new customers who do want it. This is exactly what Quantum, a leading maker of 8-inch disk drives, did. It was failing badly in the new 5.25-inch market. So when a few employees had an idea for a disruptive 3.5-inch drive, instead of developing it inside the main company, Quantum spun them off into a new, autonomous company called Plus Development. Quantum owned it, but it operated independently. Plus Development was free to find its own customers, develop its own cost structure, and chase the small but growing market for these new drives. It became hugely successful. Eventually, as Quantum's old business died, it essentially merged with its own spin-off, and the new Quantum, built around the disruptive technology, became the largest disk drive maker in the world. IBM did the same thing with the personal computer. It knew its massive, mainframe-focused organization in New York would crush the tiny PC project. So it set up a completely autonomous division in Florida, far from headquarters, and gave it freedom to operate like a startup. And it worked. The second step is to match the size of the organization to the size of the market. The new, independent organization has to be small. A small organization gets genuinely excited about small opportunities and small wins. A $50,000 order that would be a rounding error in the mainstream company becomes a cause for celebration in a small spin-off. It creates energy, motivation, and real momentum. This is why Hewlett-Packard's handling of the inkjet printer was so brilliant. HP was the king of laser printers. The inkjet printer was disruptive, slower, with worse resolution, but much smaller and cheaper. Instead of developing it inside its successful laser printer division in Idaho, HP created a completely separate, autonomous division in Vancouver, Washington. Then it let the two divisions compete with each other. The LaserJet division did what successful divisions do, moved up market, building bigger, faster, more feature-rich printers for corporate customers. The inkjet division attacked the low end, selling simple, cheap printers to students and families. Over time, the inkjet printers got better and better. They started eating into the low end of the LaserJet market. In the end, one of HP's businesses might end up killing the other. But the crucial thing is that Hewlett-Packard wins either way. If they'd kept the inkjet project inside the LaserJet division, it would have been starved of resources and killed, because it always would have looked less profitable than the next high-end laser printer. By spinning it off, they created an organization that was hungry for the very opportunity the mainstream division was structured to ignore. The final piece of the puzzle is understanding that a company's capabilities aren't just about its people. An organization itself has capabilities independent of the people who work there. Christensen breaks these capabilities down into three things: resources, processes, and values. Resources are the tangible things: people, cash, technology, brands. These are flexible. You can move them around. Processes are the ways people work together, how products get developed, how budgets are set, how market research gets done. Processes are designed to be consistent and reliable. They're not flexible. A process that's great for developing a complex mini-computer over 3 years is completely incapable of developing a simple PC in 6 months. Values are the criteria that guide priority setting. What makes a project attractive? In a successful company, values are often defined by profit margins and market size. A company that needs 40% gross margins to be profitable is, by its very values, incapable of pursuing a project that only offers 20% margins. When a company faces a sustaining innovation, it can succeed by leveraging its existing resources, processes, and values. But when it faces a disruptive innovation, its processes and values become disabilities. The very things that make it good at its current business make it incapable of succeeding at the new one. This is why a spin-off organization is so critical. It's not just about escaping bureaucracy. It's about creating a space where a new set of processes and values, ones that fit the disruptive opportunity, can be built from scratch. It's a place where low margins are exciting, small markets are huge opportunities, and failure is seen as a necessary step toward learning. This is the profound and practical wisdom of the innovator's dilemma. It tells us that the challenge of disruption isn't a problem of technology, resources, or even vision. It's a problem of management. And the solution isn't to manage better, but to manage differently. It's about understanding the powerful, invisible forces that guide our decisions, and having the courage to create new structures that can escape the gravitational pull of our own success. When you really sit with the central idea of the innovator's dilemma, it's genuinely unsettling. It suggests that the very pursuit of excellence, the relentless drive to please your best customers and boost your profits, can lead you straight off a cliff. It's like being in a car so perfectly engineered to go fast and straight that you can no longer make a turn, even when you see a sharp curve ahead. What I find so powerful about Clayton Christensen's work is that he doesn't just diagnose the problem, he gives us a completely new way of seeing the world. After you read this book, you start spotting disruptive innovations everywhere. You see it in the shift from landline phones to mobile phones. You see it in the move from traditional stockbrokers to online trading platforms. You see it in the rise of Netflix, which started with a seemingly inferior product, mailing DVDs, that was cheaper and more convenient for a niche audience, and eventually disrupted the entire video rental industry and then television itself. The book teaches you to respect the toys, the things that look like insignificant novelties, the products the experts dismiss and mainstream customers ignore. That's often where the future begins. The first personal computers were toys for hobbyists. The first digital cameras took grainy, terrible photos. The first electric cars had laughable range. In every case, established leaders looked at these things and saw no threat, because they were judging them by the standards of their own highly developed value network. They failed to see that these toys were getting better fast, and that they were creating their own value networks where the rules were completely different. For someone your age, standing at the beginning of your career and your life, this is incredibly empowering. It means you don't have to have all the resources of a giant corporation to change the world. In fact, being small and nimble, without the baggage of established processes and values, is actually a huge advantage when it comes to disruption. The Goliaths of the world are strong, but they're also trapped. The Davids are free. So how can you apply this in your own life? First, start what you might call a disruptive project. Find something you're curious about, something that doesn't have a clear, immediate payoff, and that might seem a little strange to others. It could be learning a new skill, starting a small side project, or exploring a niche hobby. Don't worry about where it will lead. Just give it a small, protected space in your life, a small organization of one, and see where it takes you. This is how you create the options that might become your future. Most of life's greatest opportunities don't come from a master plan. They emerge unexpectedly from side projects. Second, become an observer of disruption. When you look at a big, successful company, whether in technology, retail, or any other field, ask yourself, what's the disruptive threat they're probably ignoring right now? Is there a simpler, cheaper, more convenient alternative lurking at the low end of their market? Training your mind to see the world through this lens is like gaining a superpower. You'll start seeing opportunities and threats that are invisible to most people. And finally, remember the core lesson. Good management isn't a one-size-fits-all formula. What works brilliantly in one situation can be disastrous in another. The real skill isn't just being good at what you do. It's understanding the context you're in and knowing when it's time to play by a different set of rules. The innovator's dilemma isn't just a business problem, it's a life problem. We all tend to stick with what's made us successful in the past. The challenge is having the wisdom and courage to step away from that, to embrace something new and uncertain, and to give ourselves the space to learn, to fail, and to discover the future. That was a summary of The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. We've journeyed through the core ideas today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary can only give you a map. The real adventure happens when you travel the terrain yourself. The power of this book is in the quiet moments of reflection it provokes. When a specific story or a single simple phrase connects with your own experience in a way you never expected. This summary is meant to be a preview, to help you decide if this book deserves your time. If anything we've discussed today has sparked your curiosity or made you see the world just a little differently, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about gaining knowledge, it's an experience that can fundamentally change how you think about success, failure, and the shape of the future. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to click that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know we're on the right track, and it ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another transformative book from the Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.